afternoon, everybody. Welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time joining, to our Live at Lunch series. We have a really exciting day planned. Again, it's Danielle and Andrew. We are some of the naturalists at the Greenberg Nature Center, and we have Lindsay on one camera and Nick on another camera today. So what we have planned for you, obviously, we are going to be talking about snakes. So here in my hands I have Shadow, who is a ball python.
These snakes are from West Africa, and they are found in the forest, but also sort of in the grasslands right next to the forest. They kind of live in both areas, and you can see they have a really cool, interesting pattern on their bodies. And this is great for their camouflage. This is how they hide from predators, animals that want to eat them, but it's also how they hide from their prey. These animals, all snakes are predators. They do eat other animals. And so they need this camouflage to keep them hidden. And they actually wait for animals to come across them, right? Like a little mouse or a squirrel won't see them hiding under a bush or in a tree, and they'll pass right in front of them, and that is when this snake would strike.
So not only does her pattern help her to live in the trees, but you can see the way that she's wrapped around my arm right now. This is exactly how she would be hanging out in a tree branch in the wild. So her body, although she doesn't have any arms and legs, obviously, is really, really strong. She's basically all muscle, so she is strong enough to climb her body up a tree and wrap it around a branch, and it's really comfortable for her. So she's able to climb and move even though she doesn't have any legs.
That's right. Pythons.
Or hands.
Pythons are very big snakes. Shadow is a ball python, like Danielle said. She is actually pretty small for a python. Ball pythons are one of the smallest. She's maybe around 4 feet or so, and they're actually one of the most popular pet snakes because they're very docile, they're very easygoing, and they don't get that big for a python. Some people, I'm sure, think this is a very large snake. This is larger than snakes that most people see in their backyards. Around here in New York, we have garter snakes. It's probably the most common things we see around here. They can be pretty long. They can be just as long as Shadow, but they have very thin, small bodies. Those kind of snakes, they do not climb trees. They really stay on the ground. They're very fast. Shadow and other pythons, boa constrictors, are these very big-bodied snakes. They're pretty slow. They wait for animals to come to them, or they ambush them is when they sneak up on them.
So if you don't think that Shadow is a small snake, I know she looks probably pretty big, there are pythons that are 25 feet long and probably this wide. There are pythons out there that will eat deer and wild pig and really, really large prey. So if you think that Shadow is big, just imagine some of those other much larger pythons.
Yeah. So generally a snake can eat something that is a little bit bigger than the widest part of their body. So for Shadow, that would probably be a small rat. For a very large python, like Danielle said, a 25-foot python, that could be a deer or a pig. And after eating something like that, a snake may not have to eat for a full year. Here at the Nature Center, we offer our snakes food once a week. Right? That seems crazy to us. We eat 3 times a day. But they are more than happy eating once a week. And sometimes they don't even eat. They're not hungry. We have snakes that will go months without eating, and they're totally fine. They don't even lose any weight.
Like Shadow, for example, hasn't eaten since the beginning of March, I think we have on our chart. And one of our boa constrictor upstairs ate yesterday, but before that she hadn't eaten since the end of January. So snakes can stay alive for a pretty long time without having any food. So they get most of their energy from the sunlight, which is how they're able to survive without food. So obviously our snakes here don't get too much natural sunlight because they live inside, But we have special lamps that we have in all of their enclosures that give them that same energy that they would get from the sun. We need our food because we get all of our energy from food. But animals that don't get energy from food don't need as much food to live. They really just need those nutrients and the fat on their bodies to stay alive.
That's right. So shadow is a reptile. All snakes are reptiles. There are different kinds of reptiles: turtles, lizards, crocodiles are your other kinds, and they all have scales. Right? So shadow is covered in scales. She doesn't have hair. She doesn't have feathers. But one mistake that people make is thinking that the scales are actually their skin. The scales are not their skin. It is kind of like their hair. And in fact, it is actually made of the same material as hair. Hair, feathers, and scales are all made out of something called keratin. So it's just different shapes and forms. So underneath Shadow's scales is her skin, right? And we know that snakes shed their skin, right? We say it's shedding their skin. They're really shedding their scales, right? An outer layer of their scales.
Mm-hmm. So we have something pretty special planned. We are going to show you how our snakes eat. It is Thursday, which is snake feeding day at the Nature Center. Like Andrew said, we only feed them once a week, and it's always on Thursdays. I don't know why it's always on Thursdays. I think that's just the day that we've always fed them. But so today is snake feeding day, so we are going to show you how our ball pythons eat. We are actually going to feed a different snake because sometimes they don't really like to eat right after they have been held. So we wanted to make sure that our snake was really comfortable before it ate. And Tulip is another ball python. You can maybe tell that he's pretty significantly smaller than Shadow. Shadow's our biggest ball python that we have. And we also wanted to show you how Tulip eats because he is one of our best eaters. He almost always takes at least one mouse. A lot of our other snakes are a little bit more picky about when they eat.
So we just want to warn everybody in case anybody is a little squeamish. We are going to feed Tulip a mouse. So you will see a mouse. The mouse is not alive. We do not feed any of our snakes or birds live mice because for one reason, we feel bad for the mouse. We don't want them to suffer. But we also want our snakes to be safe. Right? A mouse that is alive is not going to go down without a fight. They have very sharp claws and teeth, and it is possible for them to hurt one of our snakes. So we only use mice that are already dead. Now, Tulip also strikes very quickly. So in person, it can be a little more shocking or jarring than it is through your screens here.
And when he says strikes, he means he actually does jump towards the food a little bit, and he snaps down on it.
That's right. So I'm going to dangle a mouse here for Tulip, and hopefully we get a good reaction. Looks like we will. Oh, he missed. Try again, buddy. Sometimes when it's too close, they'll miss. He's really thinking about it here. Performance anxiety. Yeah. He doesn't like to eat on camera. So a lot of us know that snakes stick their tongues out a lot. They're doing this because that's actually how snakes smell. Right? They do have noses like we do, but they cannot smell with their noses. They only use those to breathe. They actually use their tongues to smell. They have a special organ inside their mouth. It's called a Jacobson's organ. And so when they stick their tongue out, they're licking the air and they're collecting those particles, those scent particles in the air. And they bring their tongue back inside their mouth. It goes into that organ and it reads any little particles that are on their tongue. It tells them what's around. It looks like Tulip might be a little shy. She missed that first time.
So we timed out on Instagram for a second because my phone got way too hot. So we apologize. We're back, but you didn't miss anything because
That's true.
Tulip is still working on eating his mouse. We're not sure that he's going to take it.
Come on, Tulip. We are in a greenhouse, so it's getting pretty warm in here.
Yeah.
The snakes love it, though. Let's give him a minute to think about it. We'll try again. So, snakes rely pretty heavily on their sense of smell to find their prey. But what pythons can do that is pretty unique, there are a couple other types of snakes that can do it, but pythons can actually see a type of light that we cannot. And it is called infrared. Infrared is a light that is given off by heat. So snakes like to eat warm-blooded animals. A mouse is warm-blooded just like us. They give off heat from their body. And so Shadow and Tulip can actually see the light, that infrared light, coming off of those warm-bodied animals. And a close-up on their mouth, you can see that they have these little pits, these little sort of holes around their mouth. Those are the special scales that can detect the heat coming off of animals.
Can you see those?
And again, not all snakes can do this. Most cannot, actually.
Should we try again?
Try one more time. Let's maybe adjust. Tulip is usually a great eater. Maybe a little bit camera shy.
Did we talk at all about constrictors?
Oh, we
Yeah.
did not. So there are two kinds of snakes, two categories, I should say. One category is venomous snakes, which would be like cobras or rattlesnakes. And the other is a constrictor. Now, constrict just means to squeeze. So any snake that is not venomous is a constrictor. So Shadow and Tulip here are constrictors. Even the little garter snakes in your backyard are constrictors. So they grab the prey with their mouth, they hold on with their teeth, and they actually wrap their bodies around the prey, and they squeeze them until they can no longer breathe. So you can see how a big, thick, strong body that a python has or a boa constrictor would be useful when they're squeezing an animal. There we go. Okay.
So even though the mouse is already dead, it's just instinct for a snake like Tulip here, who's a constrictor, to pull the mouse back into his body. So even though it's already dead, you can kind of see, I don't know how close up you guys can see that, but he pulled the mouse back after he had it in his mouth, and he wrapped his body around it, even though the mouse is already dead, and he doesn't need to really do that. It's just part of their instinct when they eat something.
So venomous snakes, all snakes have teeth. Venomous snakes have two big fangs in the front of their mouth that inject the venom. And then they have some other teeth in the back. They're all very sharp. Constrictors do not have fangs because they don't have venom, but they do have lots of smaller teeth, and all of their teeth are like needles. They're very, very sharp. They are very good at gripping and holding on like Tulip is doing here right now, they are not good for chewing. Snakes do not chew their food. They swallow everything whole. And you may be wondering how a snake, even a large one, could eat something like a deer. And that's a pretty amazing feat. And they do that. They have extremely stretchy skin, but their jaws, right, if you look at the head of a snake and the size of a deer, their heads are way, way smaller than the body of that deer. But they are actually able to open their mouths up extremely wide, about 180 degrees. And their jaw actually separates, it comes apart. It splits into 4 different pieces, and that allows them to open up very wide.
If you guys want to get a little closer on Shadow, we can try and show you. There's a little line on the bottom of her mouth, and that's where the break in the jaw happens. So Andrew said her jaw will break into 4 different parts, and you can see on that line right there is where the jaw would separate, so that she can fit something that's about 3 times the size of her head down her throat without having to cut it and chew it like we would. If we could swallow the same way that snakes swallow, we could swallow a watermelon or a basketball down our throat in one swallow without having to cut it or chew it.
Pretty amazing. And even though their mouth can open very wide and stretch, it's still a very difficult process to actually swallow that animal. So they have a couple things that help them do that. One feature they have, their teeth point back a little bit towards their throat. And so as they point back, that helps to pull the animal in. There are 4 separate pieces of their jaw. They move one piece at a time, and they kind of, they call it walking their jaws along the animal. So first they'll use the top piece, they'll go forward with this, they go forward with the other side, then the bottom jaws come one at a time like this, and those backwards facing teeth help to pull the animal down their throat. Once it's actually in their body, they use those strong muscles to push it the rest of the way. And it can take them a long time to digest their food. It could take them weeks, especially if they eat something really large, to fully digest their food. Being cold-blooded animals, they have a very, very slow metabolism. And that's part of the reason why they don't need to eat very often.
Mm-hmm. So, before we say goodbye, do we have any questions from any of our viewers? No?
I have a question.
Okay. Yeah.
How is it that you're able to hold that snake so long without it being interested at all in wanting to do something ravenous to you?
Snakes don't really eat very often. They're not really that food motivated. If anybody watched our goat video on Tuesday, you saw that some animals are extremely food motivated. Snakes are not so much. It also, she can tell how big I am. She sort of knows like what's big enough for her to eat and what's way too big for her to eat, which is my body is way too big for her to ever be able to eat. And then, so the other thing I was going to say, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second, is it takes a lot of energy for snakes to eat. So I don't know if avoid eating is the right way to say it, but they only eat if they feel like they really, really need to eat, because it takes a lot of work and energy for their body to catch their prey and then digest it. The process of digesting takes a lot out of them. So if she's not totally interested in eating right now, she's not going to put in the energy and the effort to do that, because that could be more damaging to her than not eating.
And when a snake eats something really large, so feeding a mouse to Shadow or Tulip it's not a big animal. But you mentioned before, a larger python eating something like a pig or even a deer, that's an enormous meal that weighs a lot, that weighs that animal down. So, and it takes them a long time to even swallow that animal. It makes them vulnerable to other predators. Right? And after we feed our snakes, we don't handle them for at least 24 hours because they can get scared and nervous just like they would in the wild, and snakes are capable of actually regurgitating or throwing up the animal that they just ate so that they can be lighter and get away. And we certainly don't want that to happen.
Yeah. All right. So I think we are going to say goodbye. As always, we have a GoFundMe page at the link in our Instagram bio. You can also find it on our Facebook page, or you can go to bit.ly/GNC GoFundMe to make a donation. Like everybody else, we're really struggling during this time, so any amount of donation is very much appreciated. And we'll be back here again. We're going to be doing a little tour of our property tomorrow at 12, so join us every weekday at noon to see some animals and all different stuff. So we'll be doing a tour tomorrow.
Wait, we have a question.
Oh, we got a
Okay.
question about
The
that.
question is, do snakes bite?
Sure, of
yeah.
course.
All animals bite, pretty much. Anything with a mouth is capable of biting you. Venomous snakes, their number one defense is to bite. So a venomous snake probably would be way more likely to bite you, but like we're talking about constrictors, biting doesn't really help them. It's not a defense that they would use in the wild. So a snake like Shadow is most likely not ever going to bite us because it wouldn't benefit her. Obviously it wouldn't benefit us either, but it wouldn't benefit her to bite us. So she's not likely to do that.
And there's a difference. Shadow is a very, very tame snake. She is approaching 20 years old, and we've had her here at the Nature Center for about 18 of those years. So we handle her almost every day. She's used to people. She knows that we're not going to hurt her. Now, this very same snake, a ball python in the wild, if you try to pick them up, chances are they're going to bite you because it's really their only defense, even if it's not a good one.
Yeah. Any animal that's scared or frightened would
They'll
probably try
use
to bite you.
any way of defending themselves if they can, and for a lot of animals that is biting.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so we are going to say goodbye. Thank you all again so much for joining us.
Thanks for
and